Imagine a man living for 20 years in the desert, having to fight against demons. This happened in the 3rd century, in Egypt. Today's trivia is about Saint Anthony the Great. Here are 13 facts about him. 13. Anthony as a model of ascetic life. Saint Anthony the Great, also known as Saint Anthony or Antony the Great, is revered as one of the first Christian hermits and one of the founders of the monastic movement. His ascetic life is widely celebrated and serves as a model of material renunciation and spiritual dedication for many believers. Anthony was born in Egypt around the 3rd century AD and, after the death of his parents, he distributed his inheritance among the poor and withdrew into a life of solitude in the desert. His decision to forsake all his possessions and comforts in favor of a life of austerity and prayer exemplifies his commitment to material renunciation and spiritual pursuit. During his years as a hermit in the desert, Anthony faced various temptations and demonic attacks, which he overcame with his steadfastness in faith and devotion to prayer. His resistance to materialistic temptations and his commitment to ascetic life made him an inspiring example for many Christians. Moreover, Anthony is remembered for his humility and service to others, preferring manual labor and the solitude of the desert over wealth and fame. His reputation for holiness and his spiritual teachings attracted many followers, who sought his guidance and spiritual counsel. If you're not already subscribed to our channel, subscribe now to not miss any trivia about the saints. 12. Battles against demons. Saint Anthony the Great is known for his battles against demons, a significant part of his ascetic and spiritual life. During his years in the desert, Anthony faced numerous temptations and demonic attacks, highlighting the constant spiritual battle that saints and believers face on their journey of faith. These battles against demons are described in many ancient narratives about Anthony's life. He is often portrayed resisting various forms of temptation and malignant attacks while seeking a deeper communion with God in the desert. These accounts symbolically represent the inner struggles that all Christians face in their spiritual journey. Anthony is venerated not only for his ability to resist personal temptations but also for his willingness to confront demonic forces as part of his pursuit of holiness. His battles against demons also serve as a powerful reminder of the reality of evil and the need for constant spiritual vigilance. Anthony is considered an inspiring example of how faith, prayer, and resilience can help overcome the forces of evil and achieve a life of virtue and communion with God. 11. Resistance to the temptation of wealth. Resistance to the temptation of wealth is another significant facet of Saint Anthony the Great's life. He is remembered for his steadfastness in maintaining his commitment to voluntary poverty even when faced with opportunities to accumulate material wealth. The most well-known account of this resistance is when Anthony encountered gold during his life in the desert. Instead of succumbing to the temptation to amass riches, he chose to prioritize the spiritual over the material, demonstrating his dedication to ascetic life and his renunciation of earthly comforts. This story illustrates Anthony's deep conviction in following the teachings of Christ, which emphasized the importance of spiritual poverty and material detachment. By renouncing wealth in favor of spiritual pursuit, he exemplifies the idea that true wealth lies in closeness to God and the practice of Christian virtues. Share your prayer requests in the comments below so that Saint Anthony the Great may intercede for them before God. 10. Isolation and life in the desert. Isolation and life in the desert are fundamental aspects of Saint Anthony the Great's spiritual journey. By choosing to live alone and secluded from society for nearly 2 decades, he demonstrated an intense quest for a deeper connection with God and a remarkable willingness to sacrifice in the name of his faith. For Anthony, living in the desert was a way to seek a more intimate communion with the divine, away from the influences and temptations of everyday life. This choice of isolation also reflects the desert monastic tradition, in which many sought to distance themselves from the secular world to dedicate themselves entirely to the spiritual life. For Anthony, the desert was a place of retreat and contemplation, where he could devote himself fully to prayer, meditation, and reflection on the mysteries of faith. During these years of isolation, Anthony faced numerous difficulties and trials, including the struggle against temptations and demonic attacks. However, his unwavering commitment to seeking God and his willingness to endure suffering and solitude were fundamental to his spiritual journey. 9. Reputation and admiration of others. The reputation and admiration that Saint Anthony the Great gained during his hermit life are testimonies to his deep spirituality and devotion, which inspired and continue to inspire many people on their spiritual path. Despite choosing a life of solitude and renunciation in the desert, Anthony did not go unnoticed. His dedication to prayer, his struggle against temptations, and his relentless pursuit of a deeper connection with God caught the attention of others, who soon came to admire and venerate him as an example of holiness. This admiration and respect were not limited to his contemporaries. Over the centuries, the figure of Saint Anthony the Great gained recognition and veneration throughout Christendom, becoming one of the most revered figures of early Christianity. His life of renunciation and spiritual pursuit inspired many to follow in his footsteps, seeking a life of closer proximity to God and renouncing the temptations of the material world. His example of humility, devotion, and sacrifice continues to resonate among the faithful, offering guidance and inspiration to those seeking a deeper spiritual life. Watch the video to the end and stay updated on the complete story of this beloved saint. 8. Anthony the Great. Anthony the Great is revered as the father of Christian monasticism due to his significant contribution to the development and spread of this spiritual movement. His life and teachings exerted a profound influence on the emergence and consolidation of monasticism in the Egyptian desert and beyond. His pursuit of spiritual perfection and his commitment to the monastic life attracted many followers, who were inspired by his devotion, humility, and wisdom. Anthony's teachings on the importance of prayer, hard work, and material renunciation became fundamental to the practice of monasticism and influenced subsequent generations of monks and nuns. Furthermore, Anthony's life was marked by numerous encounters and confrontations with demons, whose temptations he resisted with courage and determination. These experiences were recorded in his biography and served as inspiration for many facing similar spiritual struggles. Over the centuries, the figure of Anthony the Great continued to be revered, and his influence spread beyond the borders of Egypt, shaping the practice and spirituality of monasticism throughout Christendom. 7. Attitude towards persecution. Anthony's attitude towards persecution is a notable example of his humility, devotion, and altruism. Faced with threats and dangers imposed by persecution, Anthony did not seek personal prominence or glory but instead demonstrated a deep dedication to others, especially confessors of the faith. Instead of putting himself forward or seeking his own safety, Anthony chose to serve those who faced the consequences of their faith. His attitude reflects a profound understanding of Christian teachings on love for others and selfless service. This posture of humility and service also highlights the steadfastness of his faith and trust in God even in the face of difficulties and dangers. Anthony demonstrated courage in facing persecution, but his courage was grounded in a deep trust in divine providence and the power of truth. 6. Ascetic life. Anthony's ascetic life is an impressive testament to his devotion and commitment to the Christian faith. By renouncing material comforts and dedicating himself entirely to the service of God and others, Anthony exemplified the highest ideals of monasticism and spiritual life. His renunciation of material comforts was not just an act of detachment but also a demonstration of his prioritization of the spiritual over the material. Anthony understood that earthly riches are fleeting and that true wealth lies in communion with God and in service to others. By living a life of simplicity and deprivation, Anthony inspired many to follow his example. His ascetic life showed that it is possible to find profound spiritual fulfillment through renunciation of material things and selfless service to the needy. Additionally, Anthony demonstrated that ascetic life is not an end in itself but rather a means of growing in holiness and love for God. His life of sacrifice and renunciation has been a source of inspiration for countless people over the centuries, encouraging many to seek a life of greater simplicity, devotion, and service. 5. Miracles and healings. The miracles and healings attributed to Anthony were powerful testimonies of his closeness to God and his spiritual power. Throughout his life, he performed numerous healings and wonders that left an indelible mark on the Christian community of his time and continue to inspire the faithful to this day. Among the best-known miracles are healings of physical ailments and various illnesses. Anthony was often sought out by people suffering from serious illnesses, and many witnessed miraculous recoveries after his interventions. These extraordinary events not only alleviated the physical suffering of people but also strengthened faith in Anthony's powerful intercession with God. In addition to physical healings, Anthony is also credited with the expulsion of unclean spirits and the liberation of possessed individuals. His spiritual authority over evil powers was widely recognized, and many sought his help to free themselves from demonic oppression. These miracles and healings significantly contributed to Anthony's reputation for holiness, making him a revered and respected figure in the Christian community. His ability to manifest divine power through supernatural interventions strengthened the faith of many and inspired fervent devotion around his person. 4. Spiritual advice. The spiritual advice of Anthony the Great served as guiding beacons for many seeking to deepen their spiritual life and find a path of virtue and holiness. His wisdom, based on a profound experience of ascetic life and a continuous quest for God, offered practical guidance and inspiration to the faithful of his time and beyond. Anthony emphasized the importance of cultivating virtues such as humility, charity, and patience. He understood that these qualities were fundamental to an authentic Christian life and to the pursuit of spiritual perfection. His advice encouraged others to practice these virtues in all areas of their lives, both in everyday interactions and in the most challenging situations. Additionally, Anthony warned about the need to resist the temptations and deceits of the world. He understood the traps that could divert the faithful from the path of truth and righteousness and therefore exhorted them to remain vigilant and steadfast in their faith. His practical advice included strategies for facing temptations and strengthening spiritual determination, thus empowering individuals to resist the attacks of the evil one. Prayer and devotion were fundamental pillars in Anthony's teachings. He emphasized the importance of a life of constant prayer and deep communion with God. His advice encouraged the faithful to cultivate a personal and intimate relationship with the divine, always seeking God's presence in their lives and trusting in Him at all times. 3. Day of Death. Saint Anthony the Great passed away on January 17, 356 AD. This day marks not only his departure from this world but also his entrance into eternal life and his full union with God. 2. Canonization. Saint Anthony the Great was canonized on January 30, 1220, by Pope Honorius III. His canonization was a recognition of his holiness and his significant contribution to Christian spirituality. 1. Liturgical Day. The liturgical day of Saint Anthony the Great is celebrated on January 17. On this day, the Christian community honors his memory and reflects on the teachings and example he left behind. And we've reached the end of another story full of curiosities. Don't forget to leave in the comments which saint's curiosities you would like to see here on the channel. See you in the next video.